As Hideo Kojima's first game since his much-publicized departure from Konami, expectations are sky high for Death Stranding, especially among Metal Gear Solid fans. And while Death Stranding is a brand new game set in a brand new universe that's attempting to launch a brand new genre, it's not entirely fair to compare it to the franchise Kojima left behind, but still, the question remains. Will Metal Gear Solid fans enjoy Death Stranding? Well, that depends on which Metal Gear Solid game it's being compared to. The core Metal Gear experience is tactical espionage action and/or operations, but each entry in the series has its own unique mechanics, systems, style, and quirks, and Death Stranding is definitely more reminiscent of some Metal Gear games, more so than others. So without spoiling anything from Kojima's latest magnum opus that he hasn't spoiled in trailers himself, we decided to break down which bits and pieces of the Metal Gear series we were reminded of while playing Death Stranding. Unsurprisingly, Death Stranding has a lot in common with Kojima's last game, Metal Gear Solid 5, The Phantom Pain. The barren post-apocalyptic open world of Death Stranding is evocative of Phantom Pain's various war zones, as is the way you traverse it. Controlling Sam Porter Bridges will feel familiar to anyone who got a feel for Venom, Punish, Snake, whatever his name is, but the experience is very different. Snake is a cyborg warlord super soldier, while Sam is essentially a delivery man, and their objectives and abilities reflect this. Unfortunately, the complaints leveled at Metal Gear Solid 5's drawn-out story and repetitive mission structure could also be leveled at Death Stranding. If you were content sending Snake on various side ops, collecting resources, and upgrading your gear, you'll probably get some enjoyment from Death Stranding, but don't expect quite as robust an arsenal or quite as many goofy gadgets like inflatable decoys and sheep abducting weather balloons. While Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker introduced many of the systems that the Phantom Pain expanded on, it feels like almost an opposite experience to Death Stranding. Designed as a portable experience, Peace Walker was primarily composed of bite-sized stealth missions in tightly focused areas, often focused on recruiting and abducting personnel and gathering resources to build Big Boss's army. Death Stranding, meanwhile, is about delivering goods and sometimes people across a sprawling environment. It's basically the opposite. While Peace Walker introduced multiplayer co-op, it was a more conventional real-time experience, but Death Stranding's social strand system is more akin to the more passive cooperative elements in games like Dark Souls or Journey. Kojima's particular brand of storytelling is abundant in both games, but Death Stranding's high-definition cinematic performances are nothing like Peace Walker's motion comic cutscenes. The most obvious thing these two games have in common is an abundance of menus devoted to resource management. Metal Gear Solid 4: Guns of the Patriots was infamous for its abundance of cutscenes, and there's certainly no shortage of those in Death Stranding. Plenty of people adore Kojima's verbose cinematic approach to narrative, but for others that can be a deal breaker. The similarities don't stop there, though. If you were a fan of MGS4's futurism, you are in for a treat. Death Stranding gave technical and character designer Yoji Shinkawa a chance to flex his creative muscles. The look of this new universe strikes a wonderful balance between believable, speculative future designs rooted in existing technology, and sometimes just having stuff look cool because it should look cool. Now, as for Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater, in spite of being released a decade and a half prior to Death Stranding, the two games have a surprising amount of similarities. Both of them turn the player loose in a wilderness, forcing them to manage a number of systems related to survival. Death Stranding will not have you foraging for food to manage a hunger gauge or tending to individual injuries, but Sam's bodily functions and personal well-being are central to the experience of Death Stranding. Beyond that, Death Stranding's titular phenomenon revolves around the dead being stranded in the realm of the living, something that Kojima first had players experience in Big Boss's fight against the Sorrow in Snake Eater. So there's that. On to Metal Gear Solid 2: Sons of Liberty. Death Stranding is a drastically disparate experience from Snake and Raiden's first outing on PlayStation 2, but once again, there is some connective tissue. Kojima used Metal Gear Solid 2's bizarre final hours as an opportunity to wax prophetic about how the internet would affect society, and almost 20 years later, he wasn't too far off. I mean, aside from the katana-wielding, cyborg-tentacled clone president. In a lot of ways, Death Stranding feels like a more optimistic coda to Sons of Liberty's bleak outlook on America in the information age, in which players connect by sharing resources and building structures and giving each other likes, all in the name of rebuilding a fractured America. And then, of course, there was that skateboarding minigame that they added to Metal Gear Solid 2, which is sort of a thing you can do in Death Stranding. You can ride that little carrier around like a skateboard. And finally, Death Stranding doesn't have much in common with the original Metal Gear Solid, which should not be surprising. The former is a 21-year-old stealth game for the original PlayStation, heavily inspired by action movies of the 80s and 90s, and the latter is something else entirely. That said, they are both video games that lean heavily on cinematically presented narrative. They both have boss fights, moments of goofy comic relief, and long-winded codec conversations. So this might not come as a surprise, but Death Stranding does have some of the same DNA as Kojima's previous work, but just like the clones of Big Boss fell various distances from the proverbial tree, anybody who's hoping for a straightforward spiritual successor to the Metal Gear Solid franchise might be in for a letdown. On the other hand, fans of Hideo Kojima who are curious what kind of a universe this veteran game designer would create given carte blanche, brace yourselves, because this is definitely, without question, one hell of a Hideo Kojima-ass Hideo Kojima game. For more on Death Stranding, check out our review and graphics comparison, and for everything Death Stranding, Metal Gear, Kojima, video games, movies, all of the things, keep it right here on IGN.